What's the most surprising thing you've ever uncovered about someone you're close to? User, Xoze. My wife's gay brother and I were enjoying a nice evening in the desert recently, while on one of our typical family vacations. I love this dude and enjoy spending time with him, talking about life in the middle of the night while looking up at the stars. User, Miss Bankakesister found out my great-grandfather had 5 children on an island he was stationed on during World War I, left them and their mother behind, moved back home to his island of birth, and started a new family. Never heard his daughter from his second family, my grandmother, ever mention the other family until we met a lovely couple from that island, and she told us all that she had 5 siblings from there. And even then it took my grandpa, not my grandma, to tell me the full story of how my great-grandfather abandoned the mother of his children and his children after the war was over. And I still don't have any names or other details of these great aunts and uncles. We're discussing the state of AI and where we see the technology going. And he casually mentions that he got a girl pregnant and she just had his son. Apparently he's known this woman for some time now, and she asked him to help her get pregnant. She had a lawyer draw up the contract, made sure they were both protected, and that he was under no obligation to support her or the child. He's showing me pictures of the baby. I'm thinking his mom is going to freak the fuck out, and I asked how he felt about the entire situation. He said, "Well, I just thought someone should be using it. I decided there was no need to go deeper than that." User, your Pop-Tart Sarah Rady. Similar story in my family. My great-grandfather must have had his first family when he was a very young man. After my great-grandmother died, we found hidden photos of my young great-GF with a young woman and 3 kids who looked just like him, clearly posed as a family. My great-grandparents married in their mid-20s, and those kids looked to be 4-8 years old, so we're guessing he knocked someone up as a teenager and had a shotgun wedding. Then maybe just left when it became too much. We have no info about the other family, so, like you, we'll never know about anything about them. User, Begenny. It was found that my father's $25,000 Rolex was stolen by my sister no more than a day after his passing. They were constantly broke and pleading with my parents for money, so I didn't find out until after she and her husband made an extravagant purchase. She might have stolen and sold the Rolex, I realized as I grew suspicious. I obtained the necessary documentation, traced the sales history, and found that my sister's pawn shop located just down the street from where the item was sold. Went to the pawn shop and, with some convincing, got them to tell me that my sister had sold it to them. My mom and I rejected her. User, Boyinowell did some family digging a few years ago. Found out my family name stops at my great-grandpa who hated his family, cut them all off, made up a last name, and moved on. When I say made up a last name, it's basically a dumped-out Scrabble bag with an Eastern European twist. Answer for above. From User, Team Great Gramps, reading the paper, boy falls in well, boy in well. And it could be worse. See the Dutch hating Napoleon and being forced to take last names and not taking it seriously at all. Gekkehaves. Hi, bosom. Padebeck. Horse's mouth. Rotmanson. Rotten people. Pupches. Feces or farts. Farts nackgeboren. Born naked Zeldentuis. Hardly at home Klutwijk. Village of Balls Uwittenbroek. Out of his pants. Wee Kruyer. Onion crier. Bandistraught. From the street, my grandpa, while in the U.S. Army, recognized some people from his town in Iowa, and they were ignoring him, preventing him from handing out their paychecks while they were speaking Dutch to each other. Having grown up in a bilingual house, Dutch-English, he called out their last names, but translated to get their attention and embarrass them for wasting his time. User, Golden Cole discovered my colleague faked his own death in his country of origin due to debt, sold us all a load of emotionally charged bullshit about tragedies in his family, only for us to find numerous news articles detailing how he left them with mountains of debt then died abroad. User, Reporter Aromatic, not me, but I found out my best friend's boyfriend was a former child molester. She sent her daughter off to live with her dad and stayed with the molester. Ick. User, Clicia. A close family friend's dad was a child molester. I went away on weekend trips with them and had sleepovers at their house. I remember holding hands with him at the roller rink because I was unsteady on skates. Then I found out he had molested his own kids and other minor relatives. It was shocking. Allosaurus. My aunt had a baby as a teenager in the 70s. She was sent to a camp for the summer to have the baby and give it up for adoption. She was told if anyone found out, the family's reputation would be ruined. My grandfather would lose his job, etc. The whole family was sworn to secrecy. We, grandkids, including aunt's legitimate children, only found out it had ever happened when she approached my aunt as her bio mother in her 40s. We were all introduced to our long-lost cousin, who pretty quickly went no contact due to how batshit nuts our family actually is. Deleted user. My sister was married to my brother-in-law for as long as I can remember. She's 15 years older than me. He was a Chinese man from an affluent family, aerospace engineer, super nice and funny guy. Our family absolutely loved him. A few years ago, he and my sister partied at their friend's house for his birthday and stayed the night. She went to bed early. In the morning, she had to go to his truck to get something, and it was covered in cocaine residue, and he had thousands of dollars in cash just sitting in the glove box. Turns out that he had been a drug dealer. They had people watching their house at one point. He had drugs shoved in boxes under their stairs and in his underwear drawer. He had started using drugs and got messy. He also had been banging escorts and was having an affair with one of his old friends who lived around the corner and using their daughter's old phone to hide it. I was in shock when I found this out because he was the person you would least expect it from. User. A clone is a clone. My father was raised very, very Catholic. They lived in this town that was billed by the Catholic Church. He went to the Catholic school. A priest he was close to eventually. Well, it came out he was a pedophile. He got convicted. My dad says he never was abused, but the way he has lived his life says otherwise. And then my dad, unprompted, starts talking about how repressed memories are fake. He does this often, usually after mentioning the priest thing. Also, his mother was quite insane and disowned my dad and her older son when they left the Catholic Church. Instead of getting rid of the older brother's things, she built a wall around them inside her house. Okay, my dad did not see her again from the age, if I think 16 or so, till he went to her funeral several years later. She would not see him or speak to him because he was left the church. User, Purgatory Heart. My dad and his siblings also all grew up super Catholic. My uncle, my dad's oldest brother, had to go to Sunday school as you did back then. He returned one day stating he would never go again. When my grandma asked why he wouldn't tell, my grandparents pressed him and he told them, the priest sawed him. My grandma beat him with a coat hanger for lying. They never spoke about it again, but my uncle also never went back to church. I just found out recently, almost 10 years after he died. He's always been someone I looked up to, and I feel so bad for him. But I guess that's where I got my hatred for the Catholic Church from. User, Dammit Maxwell. My sister recently revealed that our grandfather sexually abused her frequently when she was a young child. I was only the second person she ever told. The first was her husband, and there hadn't been a third. Our grandfather died more than 10 years prior to her telling me this. So there's nothing to do with the information but comfort her and reassure her that I believed her. There's literally no reason to lie about it. The man is dead, and she absolutely isn't the kind of person to want any attention at all. The worst part, obviously, is the sexual assault. But the second worst part is that people have told me my entire life how much I look like my grandfather and have the same mannerisms, etc. I always took it as the compliment it was meant to be. Now I think about the fact that I physically resemble my sister's abuser. User, in Anna's pocket. My incredibly mild-mannered grandpa did some seriously badass stuff during and after World War II. He'd originally been a chaplain, but was recruited to be a forward observer, which meant being dropped out of a helicopter behind enemy lines with skis and a reconnaissance mission. He ended up being directly involved in the liberation of at least 2 concentration camps, and after the war, served as a translator for war crimes prosecutions. He was fluent in French, German, and conversant in Italian and Russian. He didn't talk much about it. Once he sat down the grandkids and had a conversation about the horrors of the Holocaust, but not with many details. Only after he died I found out the extent of his involvement through some interviews published after his death. I know what he saw haunted him, and the interviews I read after his death, he also struggled with his role as an interpreter, particularly with women being prosecuted. They weren't guards, but there were women on the Nazi side who were involved. But I do think he did a lot of good, both in the war and throughout his life in so many other ways. He was a teacher, then principal, then superintendent in a small town. And at his funeral, basically the entire town showed up to share stories of his unrelenting compassion, kindness, and commitment to just treatment for all. User, something else. One of my childhood friends also worked as a mechanic at the same motorcycle shop that I did. One day some guy came in for a service, and the service writer guy was shocked at how much he looked like my buddy. A while later, we find out my buddy's dad had a secret family with 3 other kids. Both families were being cheated on by dad at the same time, so the combined 6 kids were about the same ages. User, something else. One of my childhood friends also worked as a mechanic at the same motorcycle shop that I did. One day some guy came in for a service, and the service writer guy was shocked at how much he looked like my buddy. A while later, we find out my buddy's dad had a secret family with 3 other kids. Both families were being cheated on by dad at the same time, so the combined 6 kids were about the same ages. Deleted user. Stepping on a friend's bondage gear as he desperately threw clothes over it, hoping I didn't see what I stepped on. I had to pretend not to see him panic. Beyond a lovely WTF moment. Honestly, the only way I'm going to be surprised by my friend is he or she is into something weird, and then they panic as I stumble across it, or finding out I already knew but didn't say anything. Maybe that's more amusing than surprising. My friends are mostly chill and just regular dudes and dudettes. User, Alexis Danan. Well, by close to, I mean related to. Found out my eldest sibling, F, is apparently a sexual predator. We have been no contact for over a decade now for unrelated reasons. It recently came to light that she allegedly sexually abused her autistic stepson. He is no longer in her care now, but he was for the majority of his life, since he was about 9 to his early 22nd. I knew she was a toxic, manipulative, overall mean person, but to say I was stunned would be a massive understatement. Please note that I use alleged, and apparently, as this matter is still before the courts, and innocent until proven guilty. User, Maleficentured. I found out years into knowing my best friend that she cheated on her husband shortly before becoming pregnant. Her husband wanted a paternity test, but the baby looked just like him, so he didn't push it. They are a strong couple now. Also, she used cocaine in her early 20s before she got married. She's very conservative now, so I wasn't expecting either revelation. User, Larapu. My aunt was adopted, and it was an unusual adoption, as babies were generally placed geographically a minimum distance away from the birth parents. For whatever reason, she wasn't. We always thought that perhaps it was a family member that got a girl in trouble, and my grandparents stepped up and agreed to raise her. When my grandma passed after my grandpa, and still no truth bomb about it, my aunt got curious. She found her birth mother due to some medical issues she was having and wanted to get records or history for her doctors. Her birth mother then revealed that she was 15 when she got pregnant by the father of the family she babysat for. He was 20 years older. Both he and his wife came to the hospital to see her, so his wife knew about the baby and who the father was. This man was a pillar of the community, and if my aunt shared this news with his children, grandchildren, it would be devastating to them. We know this family. I went to school with his grandkids. There is so much to include, so there will be a continues of this topic in the near future. Like and subscribe if you would like more content.